Apparently, this is such a rookie mistake. So, I wasn't even in the video when I started going live. So, here we go. It's been a while since I've done this. Um, I'm assuming Nate is okay with it since he has encouraged it before and he knew I did it before. But if anybody jumps on here, which nobody's here yet, and my audio is not good, let me know. Um, so, as you can see from the title, I started watching this series with it's an interview that has, I don't know, number hundreds of views, but it's Jordan Daniel Wood talking with um, this guy John on his channel Mystery and Reason, and a young he's a young Catholic man who's talking about they must have done it in like a non-pro Zoom account because they end up doing it in a series of 4. And so they, they're just shorter. It's a series. It's a 4-part series, and, they have a few, hundreds of views on it, and that's probably, uh and I don't know what the guy's channel normally does. He probably has 6 or 7 videos total, something like that, 8. And, but 4 of them are this talk with Jordan Daniel Wood, and it's talking about Catholicism and universalism, and I'm about through the second one, and it made me want to chat about a few things. So, uh, the first thing would be the fear of infernalism. Well, it's not even the fear of infernalism. It's the fear of changing your self-identity to an affirmative of the fear of universalism or of infernalism. So, this is a common experience that I've friends of mine have had. Um, I don't know that I particularly had it, but that's probably just because of my own temperament. I've never really struggled with fear of changing my self-identity to particular beliefs, or certain ways of thinking. As Joe Rogan calls it, I'm not married to my ideas. I think it's a really healthy way to do it. And I clipped a series, like a 3-part series, because I don't know how to do longer clips because I'm not technologically savvy, of the Greek word scandalon or scandala. And Jordan is talking about in the second one, he says he has this little section, so 3 clips. It's probably a little over a minute. It's like a minute 20 seconds or something. No, 2 minutes 30 seconds or something, because I only know how to do minute-long clips, where, he talks about how controversy, scandalon, is how the church progresses in its thinking, and it's so good. Actually, PVK's been talking about this recently, Paul Vanderklay, um, because in light of my boy Sam from Transfigured, um, and m because of his experience, his current experience of being soft power pushed out of, and he voluntarily left out of his current church because of his being a biblical Unitarian. Um, and then because of his and we had a conversation on confessionalism. Um, we Because in light of all that, Paul's been doing a little talking on it, a little commentaries, and he said that um, this is how it's always worked. The heretics, uh, have always have always pushed the thinking. So I entitled these clips that I made as Scandala pushes us further up and further in. And that's a riff of C.S. Lewis's. It's a line from C.S. Lewis's The Final Book of the Chronicles of Narnia, The Last Battle. So when they enter into the heavenly realms or whatever of Narnia, they keep going further up and further in. And it's something that I've been thinking a lot about. My buddy Cal and I and Jason talk about this. We talk about it's this. it's this relationship with being and becoming and what it means to be, I think. And Jordan speaks about it really well. And then he has a section in there at like, so in the second video at what point, I don't know, I made a comment on there. I like 33:15. He said, spoiler alert, everybody's doing this. Um, and it's true. And so they're talking about it in a Catholic context. And so uh, Jordan says a bunch of stuff in those videos that I think are fantastic. So if anybody's out there and they want to jump in, absolutely come in. So I'm just riffing right now. But he he says, you know, people call him like a, what do you say, a Protestant in drag, which was a hilarious hilarious way to say it, or like a crypto Catholic, because of his ideas, which is what his podcast that they put out one video, he and his buddy, which I can't remember his name right now, History and Dogma, is it's just this antimony, it's this relationship between faithfulness to tradition and so it's what he's playing on basically there. They have a couple technical terms for it that I'm misremembering or I'm not remembering right now. But it's essentially a faithfulness to historical criticism and history and this kind of objective approach to knowledge, but then also the dogmatic approach. And you have to hold those two things in tension all the time. He said, you know, the tendency is to revert to one or the other, you know, so historical criticism critiquing dogma or dogma disregarding historical criticism. And he said you need to keep both of those in tension. And so he and his podcast co-hosts are kind of doing both of these at the same time. And the first episode of their podcast is on Maurice Blondel, which is very, very good. So I'm getting no takers so far. I see that I've had up to 3 watchers and nobody coming in. These must not be my crew yet, or my crew is busy. So, or they come in and they jump out because they're busy working. So, back to back to the original conversation. I think that's an incredibly valid point. Is that these scandals, these heresies, push us further up and further in. And I think Sam would really love a point that Jordan Daniel Wood talked about there, because he talked about the Arian controversy, and he said even the language of like co-substantiality with the Father, you know, Jesus being co-substantial with the Father. Well, he said that was an evolution. The church didn't always hold that view, you know, or was debated, or they figured it out. And so through that scandalon, through that controversy, the church narrowed and refined its language and its understanding. And you know, Augustine, this hedge around a mystery, it it defined this language that became Nicaea, um, or Chalcedon, or whatever, any council. And so you have to keep working, and you have to keep progressing. And I think there's a and we have to really understand a lot of this is temperament. A lot of this is temperament. So, like this young man that Jordan's talking about in this series, John, I believe his name is. He says this. He says that he's an incredibly scrupulous guy. He's um, he's the kind of guy who self-admittedly is fearful of infringing upon the bounds of orthodoxy, right? Of what is commonly accepted. But the problem that I think in my scandalon clips, that scandals push us further up and further in, and infringing the bounds, you know, order, chaos, the hero, all these archetypes. Like this is just, you have to push the bounds of theology and current understandings, or else you'll die. This is what I call, in my vernacular, I've called before, like despirited breath, which is, I'm gonna jump all over the place and do my crazy Luke thing that I normally do, but it's like Socrates' lament of the written word and the medium is the message. Is that when we started writing down all this stuff, Socrates said like this will make us forget. And I love this quote from Samuel Johnson, which is, "Memory is the purveyor of reason. Memory sets the table of reason." And I think that's true, because ultimately consciousness and ideas and thinking and self-identity and imagination to me are all very closely tied to memory. And memory, I think, is not just this linear your apprehension of memory is not just linear and goes backwards, but I think it also goes forward. Forward is maybe what you could the imagination or your how would I say it? The imagination is almost like your organ of apprehension of memory or the dream. And so, but memory is the thing that sets the table for your reason. Your prefrontal cortex and your ability to focus and reason analytically, your discursive reasoning, only has at its disposal the things that your memory brings to it. And so, your memory goes backwards in time and it goes forward in time. Uh, so, so okay, I lost my thread. Somebody out there who's watching this, come in and help me. Sam, I need a Luke interpreter. Oh, de-spirited breath. This is where I was. I'm circling back. Um, That's where we were. Writing and writing would make us forget. We started writing all this stuff down, which whatever, that's gone back in time quite a ways, but it became ubiquitous around the turn of the century, around the time of Christ. People were writing more and more. Uh, the New Testament, you go back into Judaism. You have the the law, the books of Moses, and then you have the law and the prophets, and then you have the New Testament, and like that is the first kind of big canon, first big book, right? And I mean, there's things in other traditions, but I'm just talking about Christianity. And then you go all the way to Gutenberg, and so we've become a very writing centric culture globally, almost, and I think it's made us forget. It's made us fall into this thing that we call de-spirited breath, where our memory has become seemingly static and only and we've lost the imagination of the future, which is why I think these points that Jordan Daniel Wood is making about scandalon pushing us further up and further in. We've forgotten the spiral. We've forgotten this evolution of consciousness that's going further up, that's getting this increase in clarity to more or less degrees, but retaining its uh, iconicity. It's retaining its non-static ideal because it's this spiral. This other thing I'd like to bring in is Peugeot spoke about a while ago. I'm trying to remember what clip it was. What was it? It was in one of his clips that came up and I watched it, but he was talking to someone and he said one of the most simple images that we have that people love is this oh, I know what it was. God, and this is another guy I wanna plug, uh, is, the too many threads going, the specifics, I'm losing the specifics as I'm going all right brain. Um, it's, what's his name? Uh, Climbing Mount Sophia. Why can't I remember your name? K. Anyhow, on Climbing Mount Sophia, there was recently a talk with DC Schindler, it'll come to me, and Peugeot, um, which he also his series on, DC Schindler's, mystery. I have too many things going. On one of DC Schindler's books, see, I can't remember the specifics, is really excellent. But Peugeot says in that talk that one of the most simple images that is very, okay, am I not seeing comments and stuff in here and who's in here? Um, is both the curve, so it's like a line and a line and a circle, I think is what he says. So it's this idea of like a line and also a spiral. It's like two things. It's like a coincidence of opposites or an antinomy. And then DC Schindler made this little joke in there, which is true, which is like it's like he said it's almost like it's encoded in our DNA, which is hilarious because it's true. Because DNA, if you look at it from one, well, it's got many layers to it, right? On one thing is like if you unfurl a DNA strand, right? It's a line. It's a sequence of amino acids, A, G, D, B. I can't remember. Adenosine, guanine. or all these different amino acids, and you lay them out in a certain sequence, and that lays out the DNA strand. But then those are I'm forgetting all the technical words, but those spiral with each other, and then they're connected by these threads in between the two spirals. So like it's a line, or it's two lines, that two straight lines, but then they're curled on each other and connected by all these connecting lines, religio maybe, in there. And then those are spiraling together, but then those supercoil on each other into, so I suppose that would be a primary structure, a secondary structure, a tertiary structure, and then there's quaternary structures, both within proteins and DNA, and then those are supercoiled into like the nucleus of all cells, right? And so you have all these layers of structure that get like hyper complicated. And so it's maybe like a relationship of complexity and simplicity interrelated on each other, when being and becoming interrelated on each other, and further up and further in relating to each other. But to circle all the way back and to get the big idea, is all of that stuff is to say is that there's an obvious evolution of doctrine that has a progress that's moving towards something, but it's, you could say where it's going, I don't know. And Jordan said something that's great in there about universalism, because they're also connecting on these ideas of universalism, where he said, because this is something that I've said a lot, so I really resonated with it, is that I have confidence that everything will be reconciled to God, which is this broad idea of apokatastasis, I suppose. Um, but I don't know how that's going to be. And I acknowledge, which is another thing that Jordan said in there. There's a lot. I really want. I should have put the links in the which maybe I'll have Nate edit it, or I'll figure out how I can edit it to put the links to this 4-part series in in the description. But um there is this there's all these misconceptions about universalism that Jordan dispels in there that I think is really good and talks about it in a way. And there's this certain, I lost my thread again. There's a certain understanding of hell where it's like, one of the things that he talks about is that it just like is flippant to just let you do whatever you want, or it has the assumption that you can be dogmatic about it, and in a doctrinal, in a like certain doctrinal way, that like this is exactly how the complete reconciliation of all things to God looks. Like I have no idea how that looks. No idea. Um, it's I think it's hard. Is that I've often said that I think Christians understand the second coming about as well as first century Jews understood the incarnation. And I actually don't think the incarnation is really a static thing. I think it's this ongoing reality that's unfolding throughout time and space, because the body of Christ, the body of Christ is just not the historical Jesus, right? The search for the historical Jesus. There's the mystical body of Christ, which is the antinomy, or the coincidence of opposites of his bride and himself, you know? And so, um, how does the fullness of the body of Christ, that's obviously a further up and further in thing too. And so there has to be a way, because as Jordan says, this is just true. I wish people would just admit this, that um, everybody is doing this selection thing. I guess that's a point that I would like to make. Is I call it the hard problem of all perception. So people have probably heard of like the for like a philosophical materialist, and for scientists, they talk about the hard problem of consciousness, which is, um, we don't know how to make sense of consciousness. We don't know how to talk about the seer, because what is who is the observer who is observing all this empiricism and all this science that we're doing? Like, what is that thing? And that gets into like a lot of the emergence and emanation conversations, is because for a very hard, like dogmatic philosophical materialists, they will have to say that consciousness is merely an emergent phenomenon, right? So that's like C.S. Lewis's, where he says it's like a pop that you just shake up and it bubbles over, and like that's magic. We just call that consciousness. This, but ultimately, at the end of the day, you have to say somewhat that I think when push comes to shove, you'd have to say it's not real. Because ultimately, as a philosophical materialist, the only thing that's real are these physical things, which I think ultimately collapses in an infinite regress anyhow. So, like, that's kind of a silly thing to say. And so, again, with everything, you have this is probably why Tomberg's so good and why it's so great that all the folks on Grail Country went through Tomberg is because you have to have this simultaneous emergence and emanation, which interestingly is symbolic, right? It's heaven and earth. It's also what man is, heaven and earth, breath, spirit and body, incarnation, meeting it together in one unity, a unity of seeming opposites, right? Unity and diversity, which is also, interestingly, my priest told me, which is what the creed used to be called. So, like, it didn't used to, like the Nicene Creed that I say all the time as an Orthodox Christian, every liturgy and in a lot of prayers and other things. It used to be called the symbol of the faith. Great. I think calling it a symbol is a much more healthy thing because that embedded in the understanding of a symbol, if you're not a modernist, postmodern, and I'm not postmodern, but post-modernity nominalist, where you live in this divided world of like the idea realm and the material realm, nature and supernature or something. If you're not in that world, if you live in either the medieval or sacramental world of some degree, you don't have this divided man consciousness where you're tossed to and fro by every wave of doctrine. You can integrate those things. And so the symbol of the faith, you wouldn't have the problem of confessionalism that Sam and I were talking about, or that anyone. See, this is why I'm so dogged, and just tenacious about the problem of confessionalism. Because what confessionalism is a static, closed, holding on to self-identity and relationship to ideas in a way that doesn't allow the scandala or the epiphany or the opening up or the aporia or the death and resurrection. You're in the closed circle of the serpent, as Tom Berg talks about, and you don't have the death and rebirth that allows for resurrection in your own understanding and your own consciousness to have the aporia or the repentance, you could say, of seeing error, because Jordan Peterson talks about this. Error allows you to, there's a cog in the wheel, there's a break in the system. Something about the way that you understood it is wrong, and that allows you to repent and error correct, which is a big part of what your consciousness is supposed to be doing, so that your ideas can die and you don't die. Um, However, maybe there's a weird maybe there's a weird deception in that anyhow, because maybe you should just be okay with dying, even physically and even bodily, and maybe you should give yourself up to that, out of love. So I don't know who's out there watching. Somebody make a comment. Somebody come in here and talk to me about this, because I can keep riffing and bringing in the random things and threads that I'm talking about. But so I'll go here. I'll go here with the fear of death. So Michael, my friend Michael, and apparently a Grail Country co-founder, he's been. I've known Michael for a long time. I've known Michael longer than I've known Nate, and longer than Grail Country's been around. And we've talked about this stuff for a long time. Michael has been a co-lover of Barfield and Saving the Appearances for a long time. Jess, love you. Jump in here. So Michael's been around for a long time. He's loved Barfield, and so we've really related on a lot of these ideas. But I remember in one of my earlier, this is public knowledge, I'm pretty sure it's on Randos, in Randos United, the Randos United channel, which is great for anybody who doesn't know about it. go check out a bunch of old Randos United conversations, not the new one that's all about live streaming and just live streaming chats, but the old pre-recorded one where when everybody wanted to talk to PBK and he started to become so popular because one of the he's one of the hot popular kids. Um, and everybody was wanting to talk to him and he couldn't talk to everybody. We just all made friends with each other and started talking to each other. And so I encouraged Jeff and I started talking about this, and then Jeff P started the Randos United channel, and we all started having conversations, and they were fantastic. And there's a lot of great ones on there, and I encourage people to just go back and check them out. So a lot of the OG randos and what would I call them, B-level and C-level celebrities of this little corner of the internet are on Randos United, and there's lots of great conversations on there. But yeah, Michael, on a conversation, one of the first universalism conversations we had on there, I think it was Michael, was it Michael and Sherry and I? I can't remember. Get in here, Jess, you beautiful bastard.
Hey, Luke.
What up, buddy? Let me finish the thought. So Michael had this comment where we were talking about universalism, and I don't know where he's at now in relation to his self-identity and being a universalist or whatever. I would say he's definitely, see, this is like people always take this first tottering step of like, I'll be a hopeful universalist, right? You know, they feel safe in taking the hopeful universalist step, where like, which to me just seems like and I don't mean this disparagingly against the people, but like that terminology, I'm like, what a dumb term. Because I'm just like, who isn't a hopeful universalist? Like just total psychopaths, you know? Like who?
Yeah, but just saying the word out loud is sometimes.
Yeah, I guess.
Find a way to start talking about it.
Right, right. So,
to enter the room.
Right, exactly. You know, you open the door to stick your foot in. But you know, you got to be careful there, as my mom used to tell me in the '80s satanic panic. That's how the devil gets in, you know, or maybe the Holy Spirit.
Well, I had a guy tell me, it wasn't specifically about this, but he was like, "That sounds like you're getting close to a license to sin."
So in this series I'm talking about Jordan Daniel Wood, they actually bring that up too, is they think all these false caricatures of universalism and universalists is they think it's just like a license to sin. We should make a meme with like James Bond, universalism, license to sin or something. It's so much more fun with more people. Okay. So, but he said in there, and he admitted it, he kind of had the epiphany as he was saying it, as we were having the conversation, but he was just like, Michael Lady.
Oh, Michael.
So he said, I'm afraid. He essentially what he was saying is like, I'm afraid to move away from a self-identity to the affirmation. And I like to use all this language. Like it seems cumbersome, but this is what it really is. This is why I say it this way. What it is a self-identity to the abstract idea of a particular understanding of hell, which we would call infernalism, eternal conscious torment. He had a fear, like an existential fear, like in his body, of moving away from self-identifying with that idea. What the hell is that? Like that phenomenon, I think is just really interesting. Because like why are you afraid of moving away from a self-identity to an idea? Like how would you respond to that? I'm curious because I just think it's fascinating.
I think people are afraid to be wrong, and it's not just afraid of some people are just afraid to be wrong. So then
yes, but afraid of being wrong in their self-identity to an abstract idea.
Yeah, but they don't think of it like that. They think this could be a, let's say, you know, a path to something dangerous that will end up in harm somehow.
So like it's almost probably the true, okay, so to Steelman, it's almost the, I would say this is true, is like ideas have consequences. Like ideas are ideas can be dangerous, but that doesn't mean that you just like, do we avoid dangerous things? You know, this is the very
Yeah.
hero archetype. The cave you fear to enter holds the answer you seek. Like you have to engage with dangerous stuff.
Yeah, but I mean,
Anti-fragility.
like just think about how people engage with it. If you're approaching something dangerous, you're like, you're tiptoeing, you're like extremely cautious, you're like looking around, you're
Okay.
like all that stuff. And
Yeah, that's helpful.
that gets back to your comment, like why do people say hopeful? Because it's like that sort of like looking
Dare to
around.
hope. Dare to hope.
Yeah, well, that's the thing is like you're ready to just get smacked. Like if you've been you've been hit so many times, you're like, I'm going to say this, and now I'm going to get hit again. you know, I don't,
What do you mean hit? Like hit what for having a wrong idea or for saying the wrong thing or what? Like what are you talking about when you're saying that?
yeah, I mean, just like anything. So like, and this probably isn't a good example, but you're just like, hey, the world's a good place. If I actually believe that, I might run out in the street and then get hit by a car, and that's not good. So I can't believe that the world's like just fundamentally good. I've got to like, I got to like, it's better to think the world's bad, so I don't just go running off into the street and get hit by a car. Um,
Okay, two things to that.
yeah,
It immediately makes me think of is number one, Lewis again, and the Chronicles of Narnia. Of course he's good, but he's not safe. So Aslan is good, but he's not safe. Again, he's dangerous. Of course he's dangerous. And what that makes me think of is this. I referenced this before, and I want to keep plugging it because it's awesome. Like I have not. I listened to it, and it's beautiful, and I still. Why can't I remember his dang name right now? This is ridiculous. But the top, climbing Mount Sophia,
oh
Ken
yeah,
Lowry, stupid.
Ken
Okay,
Lowry.
but him and DC Schindler, they talk about in there this false conception of the good that has evolved in most of the modern world in a post John Locke world. Because he said Locke made this move where he said the good moved from this idea of the good that we're talking about, like it's not safe. The good isn't just what's safe. We shifted our mind of like the good and the bad to like the good is what I prefer and what I like, what makes me feel safe
Right.
and comfortable, and the bad is what I don't like. But that's not the traditional understanding of the good and the bad. This relates to all the Job stuff. Like, what does it
Mm-hmm.
mean that God is good? You know,
Right.
what does it mean that I can trust him? It's like he's just gonna give me what I want, like a cosmic vending machine? Like
Mm-hmm.
that's not what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's fundamentally much deeper. I think it's like that. Um, it means you don't have to fear anything, like anything, including the things that are uncomfortable and the things that are painful and the hard times and the tragedies and all that. You don't have to be afraid of them. You can go through them all, and it won't be easy, and you will possibly waver in your own faith and your own commitment. But this is where I would just say, like, God gets you through those things. Like, God is the one that I have faith in, not my own ability to believe or to hold on to anything. Like, I think
Yeah.
God himself will, it's that icon of Christ pulling Adam up by his wrist. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not going to be able to hold on to him. He has to hold on to me. That's what my faith is
Yeah.
God's ability to hold on to me, not my own ability to do whatever. And so, yeah.
Yeah. And that's and it's also God as a person. This is why the personal belief is so important because the person is the thing that is both that is not fully encapsulable and comprehensible in like a set of a bunch of ideas because that thing you can't have faith in that thing because that's going to again be this closed circle that has no life to it. It's
Mhm.
this so like what if something comes from outside of that circle and they're just like oh no my faith is shattered. Well, all that is the grace to show you your faith wasn't faith, like that was just leaning on your own understanding,
Yeah,
like it's
yeah.
not faith.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, that's where I have like some empathy for people that are taking tottering steps towards whatever.
You're nicer than me.
Well, I just know that that's how I am. Like, I just take these little tiny steps towards something I think is good, and then, I don't know. It's like, Sherry and I have talked about it coming to the open clearing in the woods, and the
Yeah.
clearing is that area where you're kind of vulnerable if you walk out into it. Um, but it's also something that you don't need to be afraid of. But it is like you can sense it in the conversations. People looking around, people like watching out, people, curious, but then like, I don't know about that. I'm not. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is where I have to have a lot more grace is because I get fired up like this, but this is my part of it's my woundedness from all my confessionalism stuff that I talked about. Because I get really mad at the intellectuals, like the people that are controlling and manipulating all this and promulgating this, the leaders, the pastors, the teachers, the people with PhDs that are making people twice the servants of Satan and fearful. Like those people, I'm just like, can you stop doing that? Because you should know better. You're the teachers. You will be judged more harshly. So
Mm-hmm.
like, can you stop doing that? But like if I'm talking with somebody personally, interpersonally, intrapersonally, interpersonally, I'm not like I'm not gonna be as passionate and fired up because I'm talking about these things in idea world right now. Like I'm not having
Yeah.
a personal
Yeah.
conversation with someone about it. Because it pisses me off because like when people go through the pain and the angst and the fear of deconstruction or they stay in their little like cloistered towers and they're fearful of new ideas, I'm just like you're what I see that as is like you're hindering your own becoming.
Yeah, but I don't think you can hinder that. I think
Well,
it's inevitable.
not at, well,
It,
right.
it, like, I don't think. I mean, this is the thing: is like that's some people have to sit there and stew for a while
Right.
and just let them stew, and some people got to patrol the borders and put up the fences and argue about where the fences are and who can go across or whatever. And you know, like, I don't enjoy those conversations. I don't engage in them. Like, it's not something I want to talk about. But I'm just like, I'll just climb over the fence and get on my way.
Right.
When
You're so much more zen than me though, because like this is
I
why
know we're kind of
like this is why I'm needed. I'm needed to just be like, let's go. Like, what
right.
are we doing? Like, you need people like me to, and like stop doing that and like get really fired up and passionate because like I don't know, like I can start fires. Like that's me though. I'm the fawn, chaos. Like I'll start some fires, but I mean shit will burn down too, you know?
We're tearing down this fence. Tear down the wall.
Right. Right. But at the same time, like, people what you just said reminds me of what Cal has been doing a lot of thinking about. I don't know how much you've been following his thinking, but
I've been
essentially it's
so
like
out of the loop. I've been in my real world. Like, I
lame,
haven't been able to
lame,
follow anything.
lame.
I know.
I
Why
well, I kind of
I was
have
excited to
to.
see you because I was actually thinking about you this morning. I was like, I haven't talked to Luke in a long time. I miss
Oh,
Luke.
sweet. Yeah. Well, that's nice.
And then I saw
Because
you and I was like, is this live?
yeah. I've been in my own world doing things too. It's like life feels like this
Mhm.
constant because our kids are similar ages, but life feels like this constant. I saw this little like drink coaster the other day that said the middle life is something like it's essentially like saying in 2 weeks things will calm down, and you just say that in forever until you die. you know, in 2 weeks things will calm down a little bit.
Do things calm down when you're like an empty nester, I wonder?
Well, that's what Sherry said. She said, I remember her sending a box where she said basically like life was just like, and then all of a sudden everybody left and it was just like
Yeah.
quiet and like who, and then that's when you go like, who am I and who is my spouse and like,
Yeah, I've known people that have had extremely hard times with that.
yeah, I've been thinking about that a lot in light of my post Illumin men's conference thing as well. But because I see it, like I see it coming. Because 6 years, man. I'm an empty nester, and it's weird.
Yeah, it'll be 6 or 7 years for me too.
And I'm gonna be we're similar ages, so we're gonna be, like, relatively young.
Yeah,
So,
I'll be
I don't know.
50. That's
I'll be
young.
46, man, young.
I just turned
So
4, so
oh, you're older than me, that's why you're wiser.
that's right. I'll lead you in the way eternal. Follow
That's
me as
good.
I Christ.
That's right. Okay, this is a good so our boy okay, Wayne said something here. Maybe this is too obvious, but this resonates deeply with Paul countering letter versus spirit. The former is law focused, written in tablets of stone, and the spirit versus the spirit, dynamic of gazing, as in a mirror, iconic stuff. Yeah, for sure. I think that's absolutely it. But like the law, but Paul also says too, like I mean, he talks about law versus spirit all the time throughout the New Testament in his letters, but those are an antinomy too, right? It's not as if the law is bad. Of course not. But like the law is the law. But like you can't. It's just like all this stuff is not new. It's like everything we're talking about is like talked about in the New Testament, but apparently like we haven't and the old, but we just like haven't gotten it yet. Or like figured it out.
Shalom. Oh,
Hezzy.
Hezzy.
So this must be post holiday, hey?
Post
If you're
holiday?
online, right? I mean,
No.
haven't our Jewish friends like been
Oh
gone
yeah,
some holiday?
Yom Kippur
Yeah.
just
Anyhow,
ended, I think.
Hezzy, get in here.
But
Say hello to us. I want
they've
to.
got another holiday coming up according to Yosef, but I don't remember which one it is.
Okay.
I could use some more Christian holidays on the calendar.
Yeah, my son gets some of those because he goes to a Minneapolis public school now, so they get extra holidays because we can't just be giving just these exclusively Christian holidays. How, you know,
I know.
like
It's racist.
ethnocentric could that be? Except it's not ethnocentric because Christianity is about
Yeah,
all
but
of it.
it's about the white man, Luke.
That's true. Okay, Chris Roberts, we're getting some comments. Let's hit them
Oh
up.
yeah, let's go.
Schindler and McGilchrist discuss the transition from ontological good to merely moral good. Yes.
Yeah, I listened to that the other day.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of what that series is about too. What I need to look up the name of that book is DC Schindler's book because it's all about that. But yeah, Bulgakov suggests the paradisical New Jerusalem as past good and evil duality. Yeah, great.
Yeah, that has to do with what you're talking about. Like people are afraid to,
We're afraid of
distance
evil.
from this idea because they think the idea helps ensure this moral good. But
Mm,
instead of actually trying to lay hold of an ontological good that's outside yourself. Like the example was or you were talking about universalism, and so they were afraid of like distancing themselves from the idea. And I think people think that their ideas do work like this sometimes, but so they're bulwarks against maybe um me surrendering to my own desires and then committing some sort of sin or
yeah, a self-imposed boundary.
do
Yeah.
something immoral. And so the good becomes something about my morality rather than the good being something that is actual in the world that
Mm,
you're trying to talk about or think about.
yeah.
Because if
Yeah.
it's outside yourself, like you're actually trying to grapple with it. Like let's say universalism is this ontological good, this hopeful universalism is this ontological good that's outside yourself. It doesn't have to do with me. I mean, it does have to do with me, but it doesn't. But then the moral good like has to do with like controlling myself and all that. So,
Well, it's a fear base, right? I mean,
yeah, and
the
that's even that
exclusively moral.
yeah, and that's that comment from the guy who was like, looks like we're getting close to a license to sin, because like, yeah. Dun, 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 dun. All right, Luke Thompson. I have a license to sin.
That's right.
I sin that so others may be saved.
That's right.
I commit crimes to uphold the law.
That's Jesus and John Wayne a little bit, right? Like the bad good guy. I'm so bad, so it's just a contrast. I see that's the thing. I throw myself out there in the heretical chaos just to keep everyone else safe,
Yeah, you're like the guy on the frontier. You're going out in the Wild West.
That's right. That's why I did this.
That's right. You're the sheriff. Because the sheriff's always kind of like a guy who believes in the law but has to do the things that the law. You have to do the things above the law in order to maintain the law.
That's right. I'm Batman. Another plug. Psychoanalyzing Batman. Peter Rollins. It's all about the Western consciousness. Another great thing I've told you about Paul. Hater. That's right.
Yeah, and then Dr. Jim talked about the Western as.
Yeah.
He talked about that a couple times with Paul.
Yeah. Dr. Jim's fantastic. He's he's maybe watching right now. He dives into all these things really well. I love his continued participation in whatever this is.
Yeah, I've had a couple conversations with him and enjoyed it tremendously. Plus, he's from Idaho, which is
where all great men come from.
That's right.
Doug Wilson.
Oh no! Did you? The church I grew up in is the church building that Doug Wilson's in now.
So you are like John the Baptist to Douglas Wilson.
I prepared the way.
Douglas, I have not followed all the. Douglas Wilson was a significant part in my journey. Actually, I think a lot of the ways that I think, which is partially just me, but is very like Notes of a Tilt-A-Whirl, comes from N.D. Wilson, his son's book.
I need to read that book. I haven't read that book yet.
It's flipping it's probably on my Mount Rushmore of
I know
prescribed books by Luke. But it's really good. Who's back there? Tell them to shut up.
Oh, they're having staff meeting in there.
Lame. But yeah, Notes from the Tilt-A-Whirl is very. That's like the Tilt-A-Whirl is the whole idea of like the spinning wheel on the greater spinning wheel. So it's like the Earth. Both the ride and the solar system is like a spinning circle, globe, spinning around another spinning circle, and then all that's spinning too. So it's all these different layers of the same pattern. So in that sense, it's kind of fractal. But he wrote the book that way, and he even prefaces it this way. He's like, maybe you shouldn't do this as an author, but I'm doing it. Because he tells you what he's doing in the book. So he takes all these big philosophical ideas and is talking about Kant and metaphysics and whatever, and then he will circle into the personal and start talking about the ant and what the ant tells you about. You'd be obsessed with the book. I know you'd like it. I guarantee you.
All right, I'll have to buy it. I'll have to get it. Doc Holliday and other characters like this, often outlaws who become the hero, are the most powerful. Yeah. I'm here.
Doc Holliday's. Oh my gosh, what a great movie. I've actually decided in my local. See, again, this is another thing that I don't know that I have time for. I want to get your thoughts on this too. We'll shift. This has started all about our hell, but I want it to be more practical about estuary and estuarily, which I want to come to your thing too. If you.
Man, I don't know what's happening with it. It's kind of in limbo. I think it's still happening,
really?
but it's like because Lance is down in Houston and he's got his new job, so he's super busy. And then I've been trying to communicate with people, but and then freaking Pajot has to announce his symbolic conference in February.
Why is Pajot always just
stepping on people's toes,
growing and stepping on our toes, stopping us to be you must decrease that we may increase, Pajot.
That's right.
Hello. Hello, Peugeot.
Yeah.
Good grief.
That's gracious.
But so in my local, our local estuary has been going for a while. We actually just had a guy reach out,
How many people do you have?
email that come regularly. I don't know. Like last, we had a meeting that had there's probably 6 of us last night, and then some people can't come all the time, and then there's a few people who have come to some of the initial ones who Paul's talked to who don't come a lot. I mean, if we had everybody around the Twin Cities Metro who's really involved in the little corner show up, I don't know, we'd have over 10, I guess.
That's good.
And then there's some people like, okay, so I don't know if Paul Antleitner, do you watch Grill Country? I need to just text him because I have his phone number. I haven't reached out to him. Like we haven't talked. We got together once, like, I don't know, 3 years ago or something.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a cool conversation. I actually saw him at one of my son's basketball games too, because his kids were playing. He was coaching. And
I see him on
so
Twitter
he's
all the time.
yeah, and he's around, but like I honestly don't know. This is something I just need to ask him. So if you see this here, Paul, or I'll text you. I don't know how interested he is in the estuary type stuff, or if he's just like kind of doing his own thing. That's right. I'm assuming this is Nate, but that's totally
Pedro
true.
needs to be a team player. I totally agree.
Yeah. And by team, not just your team, not just like the symbolic world, the Peugeot brand.
Yeah,
Like-
it's like we set up our little lemonade stand, and here he comes with his food truck. It's like barbecue sandwiches and free beer. All right, thank you, Pedro. Just
What
trying
a
to sell lemonade
flex.
over.
What a flex. But yeah, the local estuary, I think Paul was calling us out to get things going because we do have a lot of great people here. Myself,
I mean, just off the top of my head, me.
Who do we have that's great here? Me. But CW's here, Paul's here, and we actually have a lot of like really great local people who I've just
CW's in Minneapolis.
yeah, like CW lives. He's like not even a suburbanite. He's a like Minneapolis, legit Minneapolis. He said this before. He lives like a handful of blocks away from like the George Floyd corner. He actually saw that. I don't know if you heard him talk about that. Like they were walking by in one of the videos of the murder. I'll call it the murder. He was like walking by with his wife. Yeah. So
why
that's
didn't
sad,
he do anything? Sorry.
He's a coward.
Didn't want to tackle a cop.
Yeah. I mean, exactly. Geez, that's hilarious, by the way. That's gallows humor, but that's hilarious. So I'm trying to shift. But the local estuary, I mentioned this because we just got together on Sunday. Because I've been trying to think of like, because I told them something that I've been trying to do is, yeah, totally, Teo, get in here. It's streaming, my friend. Do I need to put a link? How do I do that? Oh, that's why no one's joining. The only reason, yeah, you joined because you just like have the account. So if I just copy the link, does that work?
I don't know. I've never.
I'll try it. Anyhow, I'll try that. Tell me if that doesn't work, Teo.
There's a button at the bottom that says invite.
What an idiot. What's technology? What's happening? Are you doing it?
Oh, Nate did it. Thanks, Nate.
Nate's so smart. As he's redacting just lines of data on innocent. Nate is you're essentially in like redaction hell. He's trapped. You're in limbo maybe or something.
I wonder what Nate's job metaphysically means for this little corner.
That he's a hypocrite? So he works for the government as an anarchist?
I wasn't necessarily going for that.
Oh, my bad. I thought that's what you meant.
I mean, what's the symbolic meaning of redacting Endless amounts of government documents.
Tell us, Nate. I'll post it.
He's probably just swearing right now. And
I'm sure he is. He's wanting to fight me to go back to his college days and wrestle me like I'm the fullback from his school. Here's my boy.
here he is.
What's up?
Yo, what's good?
Hey, buddy. Hey.
Hey, good to meet you.
Nice to meet you both.
Yeah. So to finish the estuary thing, because Teo, you do estuary stuff, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, you're deep in that world. I was talking to my local crew and saying, I don't know, I feel, and I've talked about this a lot in the boxer group, and stuff, is that I feel this, I don't know, I have this tension because I have like an intuition of where I need to go or a thought where I need to go, but then I'm always like doubting that perspective and trying to see the opposite of it. And so my tendency is to not be, my wife tells me this all the time, of how I'm theoretically kind of a Luddite or I'm dubious of technology. I've had a lot of these conversations with Michael too, and she's like, but interestingly, like you've built this big online world that you like to participate in all the time. That's interesting, isn't it? And you have online friends. Like, how about that? So then I've been trying to discern like what is this? I asked that question of my local estuary group because part of that is like I've thought of this before, this little corner of the internet as being, it's like pre-gaming, or it's like it's a place to test out your skills and to learn how to talk about stuff and to do things so that then you can, it's almost like a practice in self-awareness, so that then you can take that self-awareness and that maybe articulation and some of those skills, some of that like weight training that you've done, and then go play ball in like your local incarnated world, which is kind of what estuary is trying to do. And so I don't mean that that means exclusively that like I have to stop doing this completely, but to some degree, like bridges of meaning, like Joey's talked about, I can't just like keep doing this to such a degree that I never do anything locally, or that I don't increase that to some degree, because if we want to start talking about like intentional communities or urban farming or getting into like making Americans get away from like our flippin' ridiculous diet that we eat, and I like some of these things that I'm passionate about, like I have to make time for that. I can't just like sit around talking in idea land or just listening to podcasts, because then that becomes this weird kind of consumerism. Like you're just consuming ideas, but you're not doing anything. Like it's only half of there's no emergence. It's just like all it is emanation or something. You know what I mean?
This is so trippy. I might cut in and out. Let me know if my internet's bugging. But
You're good.
Firstly, this feels like a I jumped on because you two are like the first generation of this, whatever this TLC thing is, and there's like a new generation of people like propping up, but you guys are the OG, and it's sort of refreshing to listen to you say all the things that you've just said, because these are conversations I'm having with my estuary people, just trying to figure out what is this.
Yeah.
And that's so refreshing. I remember I had this conversation again with Cassidy a few months ago, where I felt I had reached a point where I'd been consuming a lot of the content that this local has to offer, but I wanted to do something with it. So I've got all this information. My ways of thinking is changing, and I want to find a way to creatively create an output for all of the things that's been input into me. And estuaries are good, has been productive to an extent. But I wanted, that's why I started participating more on the Just Chatting streams and just, okay, let me get involved. So that felt like a bit more, I'm doing more than just consuming, a little bit more. But then came to a point where I've similarly, you've named things that you wanted to get to see done. I've got things I wanted to do as well. Like, how does this, the things I want to do, the things I want, the people I want to impact, fit into this, because there is a lot of unramping to do for people to get involved in this conversation that's been going on for years and years. Like, I mean, you two, you've both been at the onset of it and participated in the conversation, and it's changed in different ways. So trying to get like holding attention of, okay, I've got this little corner part of me, which to me is very important. I don't have the language yet to say why it is important, but I also see people around that it seems important to them. So that's a key part. I've got at the time I was a Sunday school teacher and sort of youth leader at my local church. So I've got these kids that they're talking to me about all sorts, just almost none of them the under 18, I think between 15 and 18, or none of them are virgins. We're talking about just the craziest thing that's going on in their lives. And I'm learning about, the 4 P's of knowing, and trying to bring all these things together. Like, this is important, but why is it important? Because I know for a fact what's more important is the kids that I'm teaching, my little brother, my little sister, just the people in my life. So yeah, I don't have the answers, Luke, but I'm encouraged to see that you're also dealing with the same tension, similar tension.
Yeah, totally. So what that made me think of, I'm gonna draw this so that I can show you. But like, so something that my wife and I always talk about, or like, we'll see if this show up. So like, it's Venn diagrams, right?
Yeah.
So like there's all these circles and overlapping circles, and one of the things that we talk about a lot is just how to simplify our life, because our life is crazy. So my life is a little different in that. I mean, I don't know what percentage of the people in the little corner of the internet are, have kids my age and all that kind of stuff, or it tends to be most people that are in this phase. Like, I think of my friend Sarah Hardy or something, who's an at-home mom who's like homeschooling and making like sourdough from scratch and like trying to get Orthodox churches started and stuff. Like, she doesn't do this because she doesn't have time to do this. My kids are at school because I've outsourced some of these Venn diagrams to my local Catholic church. But one of the things I try to think about is, like, you can think about this in terms of like unity and multiplicity, right? So like, you have to have enough overlap of all the different spheres, morphic fields, if you want. Rupert Sheldrake, pay attention to him. You got to have enough overlap of all these different circles that you have a unity. Otherwise, like, if you have a bunch of circles that are completely separate, you're not an integrated person. You're a disintegrated person. So if whatever this is, doing stuff online, and it has sometimes in my life, it's become unintegrated, where like my wife will say things like, it's taking you away from your embodied life. Like, I'm not paying attention to my kids who are around because I'm like listening to Paul or Peugeot, which also give us some love, Peugeot. We're or I'll be like listening to them making dinner, and like sometimes that's okay because you need maybe like Papa needs a little quiet time and you need to leave me alone, and I'm doing this. It's like, I'm having my own space, which is fine. But then it can also become, I like this. It can become an addiction. So that's just like, I don't like interacting with my kids because you complain and argue with me. So I'm going to go listen to this podcast and go mow, because then I don't have to engage with you. But like, that can be you can bullshit yourself, that can be a self-deception. So you got to figure out a way to integrate that in a healthy way, because otherwise you become, like Joey's talked about, it's a bridge to something. If you just live on the bridge or under the bridge, you're a troll or a loser. Like, you're not doing anything. Like, you're not going to get married if you're just like having intellectual conversations with people online all day while and then breaking that up a little bit with like gaming and eating Cheetos. Like, a woman isn't just gonna be like,
it gets used.
I don't know. That's because that's what I have at my repertoire as I'm just
Cheeto dust.
Peter, good to see you, my friend. Thank you for the compliment.
Yeah, I mean, I think my experience is similar to yours, Luke, where it's sort of like, well, and COVID was kind of like something that like everyone was like, that's when I started getting on the Discord and started chatting with people because like literally
Right.
I could go to the office because my office was empty. I was the only one there. So I would
Right.
go to the office and I'd go home. And I'd go to the office and go home for a year and a half, or however long that lasted. And so that was a weird time. And so like, but what I found with people here is that I could have conversations that were really like sort of life-giving for me that I wasn't having. Like the people I would have pieces of like 10-minute conversations that were really good, but I wanted to keep talking for hours and hours. And you know, and that's kind of what this is kind of like a place where people that want that and need that can come together and talk about all that stuff. But yeah, and then there's but it's actually, I think it's been beneficial because it's actually fed me and helped me do some creative projects and stuff. But even in my creative projects, I'm still like the projects are helping me work out ideas. And
Right.
then, but if I'm not talking to people here, I'm not working on the projects because like there comes a point where like I get stalled out inside my own brain, and I literally have to talk to someone about it. And I have to talk to someone like Luke or Sherry or someone, because like they're people that like understand. And then I can just say all this stuff and I don't have to explain myself. I can just say it.
Oh my gosh. So that's like the most addictive part of this to me, that kind of metacognition, because I mean, you know, I'm known as like the guy that nobody understands anything because I have all my made up
I don't know why
words.
people say that about you, Luke. I feel like I understand you. And
Well,
then
I
like
know.
like nobody understands Luke. I'm like,
I've heard Luke say that by himself more than others, and also PV Kibble.
Luke
always a joke.
Yeah. So, I mean, but I've kind of, I mean, even in my local life, I'm known as that. Like I'm just, it's not like a unique thing to this little corner. It's and I don't know why it is. I mean, my mind, I'm a weird combination of a person. But and I've talked to you about this before too, Jess. The reason that is though is like part of what you just said, and part of the reason that this little corner is such a blessing, but also a potential curse of just consumerism is you do understand me. Sam understands me. Sherry understands me. Nate understands me in a lot of ways. A lot of these relationships that we've had, because I mean, we've been having, I mean, if you think about like the Voxer group, or even before that, like the Randos conversations, like Randos United, again, another plug. Julian, you know, Michael, we've been having conversations, ongoing conversations for how long now? We were just trying to figure that out the other day, 4 or 5 years. And so like there are conversations. I say this to local people and I hope they're not insulted by it, but it's just like my local book club. It's like I'm the least educated person in there almost, except shout out Jen. So you're dumber than me. No, I'm just kidding. But that's seriously a joke. I love you. But there's lots of guys with PhDs and they have doctorates and they have whatever. And like I can't talk to them about the stuff that we talk about. And often when I hear their conversations, I'll often listen to very academic conversations and I'm just like, this is, I made up a term for it. I call it smart dome. I'm like, this is a very high level academic conversation that's talking about nothing. That's like breaking no new ground. Like it's boring. It actually
Where do you draw the line? Because if someone in your life that's not familiar with all of this little kind of stuff sat down and watched, say for example, the conversation on Karen's channel between Ian and Chris, and to them it would be smart dumb as well, wouldn't it? And so where do you draw the line about what is smart dumb and what is beneficial in the context of this little corner?
No, yeah, that's a great question. I love that conversation too, but that's part of that is I wouldn't call that smart dumb. That's just like there's certain people, I'll say it this way, like Jordan Daniel Wood's a great example of this, or Ian McGilchrist or DC Schindler. They are academics, but they're academics who I would say are using very technical language, but not in a smart dumb way, like in a really great way. Like they have abilities that I don't have. Like I don't have that kind of technical expertise. I can't do that. Like usually I always think of myself as like, if you've seen the well, a little bit, but like the Goodwill Hunting, where one of his last, where he has a sit down conversation with Minnie Driver's character or whatever, and he's just like, and he asks her like, "Do you play piano?" And she's like, "Yeah, I play piano." Because she's asking him like, "How do you do this?" Because he does all this abstract math, like high level math, in a way that nobody else can do. And she's like, "How do you do this? Like, I don't understand. I want to know how you do this." And he says, and then he says, "Do you play piano?" And she's like, "No, I'm trying to be serious." And he's like, "So am I." He's like, "Do you play piano?" And she's like, "Yeah, a little." And he's like, "I don't at all." Like, so he's like, I see a piano and I don't even see chopsticks. It's just nothing. But he's just like Beethoven, Mozart, whatever. They saw a piano and they could just, it's like they could just play. They could just do it. Somewhat when it comes to like philosophy or theology or metaphysics or whatever, like I've learned a little bit of the language, but like what the intuition, the kind of thing that Rob Bell says, like the thing behind the thing behind the thing, like I've always just got it. Like that's just where my head is. Like I don't know how to talk about it. I don't know how to explain it to you. That's why I always love that George MacDonald quote from Lilith, where it's just like, "I'm sorry I cannot explain the thing to you. I but barely apprehend it myself." And there's like nothing in you to understand what I'm saying. Like I don't know how to get at it, but like I can hope you to someday believe or whatever. It's like one of my favorite quotes. And he's like, "The fact is no man understands anything. When he understands that is his first tottering step, not towards understanding, but towards capacity of one day understanding." Like I have all these little quotes that I just keep bringing up in the little corner all the time because I'm just like, this is it. This is everything. Like Lewis, what you see in here depends a lot upon where you're standing. It also depends upon the kind of person you are. Like that says, in a very succinct way, that says what like McGilchrist and Vervaeke would say, like would take hours to say. And I'm like, that's it. Like just think about that. Like that will tell you everything. And I can't explain to you why, but like but to Jess's point a little bit, like this whole thing that we're doing, just chewing on it, ruminating on it, talking about it, because Peterson talks about that, thinking. You have to talk. This is why free speech is so important. You have to be able to talk and say what you really think to be able to think. You can't even think unless you do that, So, anyhow, sorry.
Jess, what do you make of it? The line between intellectual masturbation and actually having.
I think I don't know. It depends on, because sometimes the people involved in those like very high level nerdy conversations, like they're getting something from it. I'm assuming, like, why are people engaging in this? Like they're obviously like either wrestling with something or playing with something, or so I don't know where the line is, because like there, like Luke said, there's some people, or I think Luke said it. There's some people like these kind of conversations, like they'll just see it. They'll be like, "Oh, that's a bunch of nonsense." But like I get it, I understand it, and it's helping me. So it I don't know. I think I was thinking about kind of Luke's Venn diagrams of life. So I'm thinking about my life, how it integrates into each other, and so like the types of conversations I have with people are not the types of conversation I have with you guys, but
right.
If I listen to them, we're all talking about the same kind of stuff,
100.
at different levels. And so I've been really kind of, it's one thing to be like, I did this once with a friend. I listened to like a great podcast, and you guys have probably done this too. You listen to this great podcast. It's like something turn on your head, and then you like word salad it to your friend, and your friend's like, "What?" And you're like, "No, don't you get it? Don't you get it? Don't you get it?" And then you try to explain it some more, and they don't get it. But then like,
yep.
So that happens. But then there's times when I'll actually like listen to someone and they're just going through something maybe very practical, or maybe it's dealing with something kind of outside my realm of knowledge, and they'll be starting to hit on different things, and then I start like at least for me, like it starts, I'm like, oh, this corresponds with that. This corresponds with that. So let me say something in their language of something that I already kind of mess around with. And usually like it ends up being like a good conversation, but it'll be on some other level. But it just takes time to like talk with people and figure out what language they're using and what words they're using, but trying to make those connections that sort of correspond with stuff that we've already been talking about. And because like one thing that's happened to me, like talking with everyone here, is like it really is like a world that's kind of like I have this map in my head, and if I can just like and I find it really does connect with people in real ways. I just have to listen, figure out where we are on the map, and then sort of try to navigate in those areas. So it's yeah, I don't know if any of that made sense.
No, a lot of that made sense. Just for a little bit of context, I've been spending a lot of time in the Christian v Muslim debate world recently. Partly because, well, mainly because I've been attending Speakers Corner since coming back from the Chino conference, and for Speakers Corner in the UK is pretty much the place where you can have quote unquote religious conversations, unless you're going to go into a mosque or a church. It's for the most part, the UK is very much just a secular country. God died a long time ago, and we don't talk about it no more, pretty much. Although there is sort of a resurgence with the similar crowds to the new atheist, but that's mainly online. Speakers Corner is mainly Muslims, and they take pride in the fact that they have told people come in. I met people that flew into London just to go to Speakers Corner and meet a few of the Dawa preachers, because they've built a online following, and it's very profitable for them, and I think they're getting conversions from it as well. But Speakers Corner serve as sort of like a battleground of propositions, and this is partly why I jumped on when I saw you, Luke, because I'm witnessing something that I think you've been speaking about, which is this meaningless battle for proposition that that doesn't lead to productive conversation. It's been so I've tried I started estuary at Speakers Corner, and I've had a few attendees, and it's tricky keeping like making the spirit of conversation that manifested at Chino just effortlessly, and trying to bring that to more combative, more. I think Vivek got a word for it, for Leo Sophia and the other one. So yeah, watching that play out, I need to talk about it just to your part, just to make sense of it.
Yeah, it's one of those things, like I don't think you can, like someone has to want to participate in it. Because you can't force someone to, you can force someone into a debate, I think. You can't force someone into like a reciprocal conversation. It either happens or it doesn't. And you can't shame someone into it. You can't like it's just like like either someone wants to participate in a real conversation or they don't. And I think yeah, it's difficult. And so like what you can do is just sort of model it, so you can have examples of conversations. The way you participate in how you talk to someone will kind of dictate whether you're, I think there's kind of like judo moves you can kind of do to like avoid debate. And I think some of those things are useful to learn. But if someone really wants to debate, they're not gonna they're not gonna engage like that. So
I mean, just to back up what you just said, I can definitely attest to the fact that it's very easy to get sucked in, to get dragged into a debate, rather than drag someone that wants to debate into a conversation.
But that's spirits, man. That's like spirit powers and principalities. Exactly what that is there's a spiritual pattern which is going on, which is debating or propositionalism. Because I want to comment on this because I just saw this. Like propositions are finished, only actions now. Contrary to what people think about me, I don't actually think that's true. I actually think we need propositions, but the spirit, the thing behind the propositions, which I would call propositionalism, like being stuck in our closed understandings of the words, which speaks to like Jess, what you were talking about, is this is why engaging with someone who's just like, these conversations are dumb and make no sense. And when you have to explain it to someone else, they're just like, what are you talking about? The reason that that is good for you is because, and anyway, and lots of people talk about this, like philosophy like you ought to be able to explain it to somebody at a bar or a child, you know, because you really should, because part of that is your own becoming and understanding it at a fuller, better, deeper way. You die to your own language and your own understandings of things to try to get to the unity, because like you said too, we're all talking about the same thing. So that unity, that higher unity, which we're articulating but is unarticulable, you have to die to your own words and try to use words that they can understand to get to a higher unity, and through that both of you grow.
Yeah.
You know, but debate doesn't do that. Debate is colonizing. Debate's stupid.
I read something on Twitter that was basically talking about this, like, you know, and Nate's even said stuff like this because he was in debate in college, and basically like you can boil down debate to just like arguing over definitions.
Yeah.
And so and then you basically set up your definition and then you argue that this definition is the case or whatever. But I wonder if a way we can kind of go like subvert that is to basically let go of definitions. So if someone wants to define God as, you know, like we're having a conversation about God, it's very sort of debatey. And you're like, how do you define who God is? And they define it like this. Okay, we'll use that definition for God. I'm going to talk about this other thing. And then you just give a new word or something. You're like, what about this? And then that allows you secede the definition to someone. And then you propose something new, which is actually the thing you wanted to talk about anyway. And
that's what people do all the time. Like when people stop talking about God because they can't, because it's been too constrained, and they talk about the universe.
Yeah, that's the whole like
spiritual but not religious. Yeah, that's what people are doing all the time. That's what Jordan Daniel Wood says, that I made a comment on in the second of this 4-part thing that I started all this with, is like, and he was just like, guess what? Everybody's doing this anyhow. So like, we might as well just admit that that's what everybody's doing, and then talk, and then actually have conversations, you know?
Yeah. Instead of trying to like argue over definitions, just give that up, and then like propose something new, or
yes.
And that, I don't know exactly how to do that, but the thought crossed my mind the other day. And that's like, if someone really wants to debate over definitions and you just constantly give them up, they'll be like, they'll either be just like, yeah, I told you so, and they'll be on their way and just happy about winning, or they'll be like, what the heck is going on? And then they'll be curious, and maybe that could be the entry point of actually having a conversation.
Oh, that's a curious word, pun intended. Curiosity is something that I don't think if you're debating, you're not allowed to be curious, because from what I've observed so far, to win a debate is just to make sure that you force your narrative on your narrative is the one that's being with, and that usually ends with debate. But really quickly, this conversation right here, this was what I was hoping to get the Christians as speakers going to engage with. So at the end of the day, the Sunday evening, the Christians go off to a pub go up to a restaurant or a pub for it feels genuinely like if you've played team sport, it's like after the game, you're back in the locker room and now you're just talking about, okay, this is what went right, so we could have got. It feels very tactical. And the tactics are all about, okay, these are the propositions that we should front, and these are the ones that they will front, and it's all very, let's all get our propositions in a row. These are the doctrines that we are not budging from. The Trinity is a big one that comes up every day, and these are the verses in the Quran that you can bring up to get them on the back foot and force your narrative upon them. and it all just feels very gross to me, quite frankly. After
Mhm.
spending time in this spirit of conversation, yeah.
Yeah, it's
Um,
terrible because it's a zero-sum thing. It's the equivalent. It's the intellectual equivalent of like what Jordan Peterson talks about with having a fight with your wife, and you want to win, and he's like, "Does anyone win if you win?" He's like, "You but no, you both lose." That's like what a debate is, but just in
Mhm.
the intellectual world, it's the same thing. Everyone loses.
but
So,
as me trying to do a little bit of self-reflecting in my conversations with the Christians at the corner, there is a sense in which they take it more seriously than I do, because they
mm,
see the Muslim presence as an existential threat to the spirit of the nation in some real ways. And I'm sure a lot of that's mixed in with politics and immigration issues, and all of this plays a part for sure. But to an extent, they feel their faith being challenged, and they are ready for a fight, quite literally at some, like, in some cases. And I don't feel that way, so that it's frustrating, because I want to applaud them from, yes, guys, we're on the same side, you're fighting a good fight, there are some crazy ideas being espoused, but at the same time I'm like, there is a better way of doing this, we can engage better.
Yeah.
So I'm confused.
all right. So I'm gonna be taken off. Jess, can you still
I gotta go
man
here
it?
too. I gotta
I
get
too,
Okay.
I gotta go as well,
Okay.
since
Okay. Well, it's a good ending point, I guess. But I think because
yeah.
I mean that what you just brought up, Teo, is
Like the big
huge.
question
Like
is how do you
the cultural aspect of it, the national aspect of it, that's the geopolitics and how that relates to ideas is a big part of it because that stuff is real. Like this is where I'm not kind of that unilithic kind of perennialist where it's just like it doesn't matter. Like different cultures and different religions are different and they manifest different things. Like they're saying different things. And I would argue that like I don't know. I think the colonizing spirit, the kind of that I critique within a lot of kind of evangelicalism that wants to control the narrative and conform everything to its identical self. Well, that same spirit is in Islam too, and I think both of them suck. So like,
Yeah, but
um,
that's the benefit of kind of coming at the view of like these are spirits that can,
yeah,
because I mean there's mystical traditions in Islam too that's very
totally.
so there's a whole wide range of all kinds of stuff that's happening, and if we're gonna yeah so the debaters are going to debate, and then how I think sometimes people feel a little bit like what we're doing is a little too passive, um, a little too slow, a little too like there's actual existential threats out here that are going to
Yeah.
destroy. And I'm just like, I don't know what anyone wants us to do. Like, are we going to start a political party? And like, I don't even know. Like, we don't even know what's happening here. Like, we can't even
Yeah.
describe what's happening. But yeah, we're gonna like start, I don't know, marches, or I don't know what people want to do. But
I mean, the one thing that we could all agree on is like more political engagement is definitely the answer. Like that's fixed a lot of the problems in the
that's
world for sure.
tried and tested and proved to be.
That's right.
I think it's
And also this is Luke Thompson, licensed to sin. I'm out.
dun, 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 dun.
All right. It was good to
See you
talk to you
guys.
guys.
Thanks for
Peace.
having a chat, boys. Have a good
Yeah. See you, man.
Bye.